Hello guys! Recently I found this controller for a cheap retro console online. After taking it apart, I was surprised by how much empty space there was inside. Considering the fact that modern microcontrollers are not only small, but also quite powerful, this gave me an idea to fill this empty space and create my first 8-bit retro console. You are watching Logic Gate Labs, let's get started. After doing some research on websites and forums, the number one recommendation would be to use this ESP32-S3 board, the N16R8 version, together with the RetroGo library. RetroGo, if you look deeper into the details of the library, seems to have been created specifically for this development board. And most emulators run on it without any problems, launching most old 8 and 16-bit games with stable FPS. And that is not surprising, because at the core of this board there is a dual-core Extensa LX7 processor running at 240 MHz. The two CPU cores allow sound, input-output logic, microSD and system tasks to be moved to the first core, while the emulator logic, and therefore the game itself, can run on the second one. It has 512 KB of SRAM and 8 MB of PSRAM. SRAM is RAM integrated directly into the chip, which makes access to it incredibly fast. Part of this memory is used for data caching, so the real amount of available RAM can be slightly lower. PSRAM, which stands for pseudo-static RAM, is not integrated into the chip and works more slowly. You can compare it to external computer memory, the same RAM sticks that now cost as much as new iPhone. Even though PSRAM is slower than SRAM, it is exactly what makes emulation on this development board possible. The thing is, most ROMs, meaning game files for old consoles, can be anywhere from 128 KB to 16 MB in size, depending on the game. Reading files directly from an external microSD card would cause constant FPS drops and even full system freezes lasting several minutes. So the solution to this problem was very simple and elegant. Load the entire game file into RAM. In other words, not only the code but also the textures, music, dialogues and other assets are loaded into memory for every existing level in the game at the same time. As for flash memory, there is also enough of it here, 16 MB. This amount even allows you to skip the microSD card module in early stages. The firmware itself and around 20-30 small games can fit into this amount without any problems. Everything sounds like this board is perfect candidate for a retro console, and this is true, but for a simple 8-bit console this is a bit too much power. And with that much power, I would also want a slightly bigger screen than the one I am planning to use, but a larger screen will not fit into this case. And the size of the microcontroller is also a bit too large, considering the fact that there will be a bunch of other components inside. So let's do it this way. We are not saying goodbye to this board completely, and in the future videos we will definitely build something interesting with it. But for now, let's look for less powerful, cheaper and smaller alternatives. Can we use these ESP32 boards in the SuperMini format? The ESP32-H2 and ESP32-C3 versions are an immediate no, because the CPU frequency is significantly lower than on the previous board, and at the same time, the number of pins is noticeably smaller for the number of components we are going to use. But the ESP32-S3 SuperMini version is twice as cheap as the original version, has plenty of pins and is based on the same dual-core Extensa LX7 processor as the previous S3 board. So, is the choice obvious? Unfortunately, no. All three boards are missing the most important element, PSRAM. Without it, we simply will not be able to run games. Although versions with PSRAM apparently do exist, unfortunately they are very difficult to find in online stores. And even if you do find one, there is a chance that this is a scam. So for now we will forget about the SuperMini options. After searching a little longer, you can find this board. This is the ESP32-S2 Mini. In terms of size, it is slightly larger than the SuperMini versions, but still much smaller than the original ESP32-S3. As you can see, there are more than enough pins here, and it fits into the case without any problems. In terms of power, it is the same Extensile X7 running at 240 MHz, which we are now seeing for the third time, but in this microcontroller it is single core. That is not a problem for our case, and most 8-bit games will run without any issues. The most important thing in this microcontroller is the presence of PS RAM, 2 MB of it. Yes, 2 MB is not 8 MB. Game Boy Advance games will not run here. But as I said earlier, in the future videos we will definitely return to more powerful ESP32 versions that can run almost any emulator. We have figured out the brain of the console, so let's move on to the display. I choose this square display with a resolution of 240 by 240 pixels. It is good quality, has wide viewing angles, is bright and inexpensive. We will also use this microSD card module, and this small speaker for sound. A TP4056 charging module, this small switch, and a 500 mAh lithium polymer battery. Make sure it fits inside the case. As for the case itself, there are not many options. The main requirement is free space on the front side for placing the display, free space inside the case for placing the other components, and the ability to use the existing board for the input system. This controller worked best for this, because it has noticeably more space inside compared to the others. Besides the free space, you can also notice these solder pads on the input board. The thing is, we cannot simply take these existing wires and read them with the microcontroller, because the logic of this thing is custom and made specifically for the cheap retro console that this controller came from. But what we definitely can is solder our own wires to these pads and read the signal on the digital pins of the microcontroller. So let's probably start our build with this. On this board we could attach 10 wires for ground and 10 wires for pins in order to handle each button separately, and in the end we will get 20 wires in total. Or we can find which of these solder drops is ground and reduce the number of wires to 11. That is what we will do. Each button works correctly if you use the second solder drop on the input board as ground. You can even notice that these top buttons called TB and TR do not output a stable signal when pressed like the other buttons do, but a pulsing one, switching between 1 and 0. This means that this white blob chip actually works, because the TB and TR buttons are turbo versions of the buttons below. In other words, these are buttons that will automatically press repeatedly very quickly while the user is holding them. And of course this is a plus for us. An extra useful feature never hurts. This is the final result. In the video you can see that I soldered the TB and TR buttons, but this was my mistake. They do not need to be soldered, and later I will remove them. The thing is, they are already connected to the buttons below. They are working fine, and soldering them will only interfere with the microcontroller working properly. We should remember the wire color for each button, so we do not make a mistake when soldering them to the microcontroller. Although this is not that scary, because the microcontroller can be reflashed many times, and the pin values can also be changed in the RetroGo configuration files. The next step is preparing the case. First, we will remove this standoff that holds the input board in the correct position. This is needed so that the display can fit in the inner side of the case. This will not be a problem, I checked it, and besides we still have a second standoff. Let's prepare the display itself. We drill 4 holes for mounting the display. They will be our reference points for drilling the main hole for the screen. Let's drill a small hole in the center and gradually expand it until the display finally fits inside. We secure the display with screws and get this result. Let's also drill holes for the microSD card module, for the charging module, for the microcontroller, and for the switch. As we can see, everything is securely fixed. Before connecting the components together, first we need to prepare them for soldering, within every pad that we will later use for connections. Do not forget to clean them from flux. Right away, we soldered the wires for the microSD. Oh yeah, we almost forgot about the speaker. Let's drill holes for it and slightly clear some space in the case. Let's solder it to the microcontroller. Let's solder the switch. The further we go with soldering, the more negative wires we will have connected to the microcontroller. So instead of building a tower of solder on one pad, we will use this copper wire and solder all possible grounds to it. This is how it will look. We soldered the microSD card module to the microcontroller and get this result. To keep the wires from interfering with further soldering, we can gather them in one place and wrap them with a tape. Then we solder the input board to the microcontroller. For the display wires, I initially chose wires that were too thick by a mistake. They take up a lot of space inside the case. They are useful, for example, for the power section. But for the display, it is better to use these thin wires. The final assembly steps. Let's solder the display, the battery, and we get this retro console. The build cost is $17. And if you order the parts from Chinese marketplaces, it will be twice as cheap. You can see that there is already something on the screen of the console. Yes, this is the Retro Go that we were talking about earlier. As for the firmware, in general everything can be found online if you want to. But since ESP32-S2 is not supported by default in Retro Go as a target, meaning as hardware known to the project, a small instruction is still needed. And I made one. But if I explain it right now, it will be boring and will take more than 5 minutes, so I will leave the instruction in the description under the video. 5 minutes? Why so long? Isn't it just pressing 2 buttons in Arduino IDE? The thing is, RetroGo is not an Arduino project. It is not a single Ino sketch that can be easily uploaded to a board, but a full, complex, multi-stage project. It starts with generating project files using CMake, installing drivers, configuring files, which will be a big part of the instruction in the description, and ends with a compilation using aggressive optimization specifically for ESP32 chips. And these preparation steps cannot be done in Arduino IDE. All the details are in the description under this video, including the pinout, and we are moving on. As for games, I am somewhat limited. The thing is, games like Mario, Zelda and other popular 8-bit titles are intellectual property of Nintendo. Downloading ROM files from the internet and then running them on emulators is illegal, but there are websites with free games for emulators. Playing those is completely legal, and these games can even bring more enjoyment, because even though they are 8-bit, they are still more or less modern. You can feel the newer game design in them, which has changed a lot for better over the last 30 years. And now, the main question. Will Doom run on this device? To run Doom, during flashing we add the PRBoom-Go module and place a WAD file on the SD card, for example the free Doom file. Of course, the whole game will not fit into the ESP32-S2 RAM, but Doom does not load everything at once. The levels are loaded separately, so this format works perfectly fine for this device. In the launcher, among the emulators you can see a separate section called Doom. After launching the WAD file, we see a menu that is frozen and does not react to buttons presses. Let's reboot the console and try again. It freezes again. We try one more time. And now, at least we can hear the music from the game. And we can see the game is loading. Very slowly, but still loading. The game gives around 5 to 15 FPS, depending on how complex the scene on the screen is. Overall, it is playable, although in some moments it is not very pleasant. These long loading times and low FPS are the result of having only one CPU core. But we were planning to run 8-bit games on this console, and here we managed to launch a 32-bit game, which is already incredibly cool. So this turned out to be a pretty nice 8-bit retro console. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, friends. Write in the comments what could be improved in this console, and I would also appreciate your subscription. See you next time. Take care.